things are as daring or as dangerous as trying to portray a history already brimming with so much poignancy. Many are calling the 6888 Tyler Perry's best work, and I must admit, going into this film, I was definitely skeptical. I still am, by the way. Actually, it's a little bit worse than that. I am suspicious. In this review and discussion, I will tell you exactly why, but this, for now, is my analysis and discussion of the 6888. I hope you enjoy, so without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so the film's backbone lies in its portrayal of the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion, a unit so overlooked in the narratives of World War II that, to be honest, its mere inclusion feels revolutionary. Led by the incredible Major Charity Adams, the highest-ranking black woman in the US Army during the war, the battalion's mission was extraordinary in its simplicity and in its impact. To clear a massive backlog of undelivered mail that threatened troop morale. Now, the task was completed under horrific conditions, you guys. Freezing warehouses, blackout lighting, and even rats chewing through letters. And in just 3 months, they managed to process 17 million pieces of mail in Birmingham, England, and then later moved on to France to tackle an even greater backlog. Leading this operation, like I said in the beginning, was Major Charity Adams, a woman, like I said, I can't argue is definitely of extraordinary resolve, who famously, and as portrayed in the film, stood up to the general, specifically a white general's attempts to demean her leadership with these iconic words: "Over my dead body, sir." I will start off, honestly, by saying this. I can see that Perry definitely crafts a compelling canvas for their story, spotlighting the gender and racial barriers these women broke down in real time. However, I would though apply a few honest caveats and conscientize you to the fact that the narrative does occasionally shift, embellishing a few historical moments that I will outline today to effectively amplify modern relevance through fictionalized dynamics, dramatizations, and Tyler Perry-esque creative liberties. While this undeniably might not sit well with purists and anybody who has, a bone to pick with Tyler Perry himself, it undeniably tries to underscore the battalion's resilience and the sheer audacity of their accomplishments. To the extent, though, that they genuinely deserved. I guess what I'm saying is, did Tyler Perry do a good enough job in highlighting the efforts of these women? Well, I think that's where the conversation around this film gets prickly. That's where things get controversial, and that is exactly where I want to kind of tackle this beast. Because like I said in the beginning, I did have some issues. Now, I appreciate that Tyler Perry took a few creative liberties, a few predictable avenues that would itch at anybody who has watched Tyler Perry's earlier projects. But my argument is that for a history so rich and poignant, he really did not have to. The history already speaks for itself. And the reason this matters to me is impression. Unlike most of the movie's critics, and I will say that this film is almost universally loved, but unlike most of the movie's critics, I was actually very emotionally attached and moved by how the liberties in this particular plot unfolded. And that actually scared me a little, because I found myself wondering to what extent I was sympathizing genuinely with, the real thing, with the real history, or just pandering to modernity. I think what ended up happening to me is that after researching a little bit more on the 6888, the extent to which certain dramatizations, as emotionally resonant as they were, might have been artificial. Right, this potential extent became of severe interest to me. It is definitely not a comfortable kind of research to do, especially for a piece of work that you enjoyed, but because I decided I did want to do a review, I had to. At present moment, that is as of this recording, so you can, if you know more about this, you can definitely pop me a comment and just, help everybody involved. At present moment, I don't know to what extent Lena's relationship with Abram Hyman David, who was a Jewish boy whose parents owned a delicatessen on Elmham Terrace in her neighborhood, was exaggerated. And that impression is important to me because I was very attached to that relationship. So Lena herself, the focus of this entire movie, we really do focus on the life and events of Lena. So she was working at a hospital when David died, who was her friend, and I must emphasize friend, because to this day, that is how the late Lena Derricott maintains to identify this individual. So his death, according to the film and according to other sources that I did, just peruse over, this is what inspired her to join the army forces. Unlike most critics, I actually was not exhausted by their relationship, as you know, a lot of people make the valid argument that it was underdeveloped. Yes, it was. Yes, it was underdeveloped, but I do think that there was a genuineness to it that I definitely found myself quite attached to. I wasn't exhausted by it. And Lena's grief, highlighted throughout the entire film, definitely tugged on my sympathy, which is precisely why the degree of liberty taken in representing that relationship matters. Especially as Abram's literal ghost made several reappearances throughout the film and became part of a love triangle of sorts that between Lena, Abram, and Hugh that I was not expecting. And I say love triangle even though Abram for the majority of the film is dead, because Abram has such a deep emotional influence on Lena and the way that she navigates herself throughout the narrative, and in relationship to Hugh, who I don't know how to feel about him either, because he literally left his wife slash fiance after talking to Lena a total of maybe 3 times throughout the film. Not meaningful conversation, not meaningful banter, just hi, how are you kind of thing. It was just so strange to me that I don't know, I didn't feel as endeared to Lena's relationship with Hugh as I did with Abram, because Hugh felt a little bit disingenuous in his attraction towards Lena, but that's just me. I did find this commentary by Perry in an interview with Today, again, the extent of the film's accuracy to Lena's intimate relationships, and to make it very clear, according to the film, Lena did have Lena did have an intimate relationship with Abram, even though she maintains to identify him as her friend. And other intimate relationships that Lena had did quickly make themselves the central focus of the film. Right, the extent of this accuracy could not be determined by me, as of right now at least. Again, if you know anything more, please pop them in the comment section down below. But from the interview, I did get the impression that Tyler Perry wanted us as an audience to know that the late Lena Derricott did give the film, or at least the initial versions of the film, her blessing before she passed away in January of 2024. But I won't paraphrase. In fact, I'll actually read you the section of the article just so that you can appreciate what I'm talking about. Lena Derricott King was also a veteran of the battalion who helped Perry with his research. Quote, "I met her when she was 99 years old. I didn't know what to expect," Perry told Hoda on Today, December 17th. Quote, "I wanted to ask her about the 6888 before I started writing. When she comes down to sit and talk with me, I'm like, is she going to be in the right mind? Is she okay?" Perry said his clear interaction with King quickly washed away all of his concerns. Quote, "99 and sharp as a tack. She told me these incredible stories. Her recall and memory was so great that when I ran it by a historian, he was blown away that she could recall that much." Perry was able to show King a rough cut of the movie before she died at 100 in January 2024, and the filmmaker said she, quote, "loved it. She was saluting the screen, she was laughing, and by the end of it, it was so powerful," he said. According to Netflix's Tudum, she was in tears. She just said, quote, "Thank you so much for letting the world know what we contributed." So again, clearly by this article, it seems that Lena Derricott did give her blessing, at least for the initial rough cuts of the film shown to her in January of 2024. My sorer concerns though lie, and I know that not everybody is going to agree with me, but this is an opinion, this is a review, so here we go. My sorer concerns lie in the film's reliance on tropes symptomatic of modern anxieties surrounding the experience of discrimination in general. Perry's creative liberties often throughout the film, again, just my impression, they often reduce complex historical realities to oversimplified dynamics more reflective of his very familiar storytelling patterns than the integrity of the 1940s context. For instance, the cartoonishly villainous white characters, they were so cartoonishly racist, as, you know, save for Abram, he was perfect, but the depiction of racism there was so cartoonish. It was almost funny, and I think this might just be my general issue with films that depict white people being racist, because if you've ever experienced, you know, in real time a white person being racist, it is it is not this cartoonishly villainous. It is offensively subtle in a way that doesn't, like in the film, inspire you to kind of burst out laughing. I don't know, the white racist characters in the film just felt so one-dimensionally cartoonish. Maybe I've just experienced racism differently. That was just that, but I don't know. There was just this unrealistic undertone to it that I couldn't shake off. And again, just my impression. It almost felt like if any white person in my immediate life were to come at me emulating that behavior seen in the villains throughout the film, I would almost be too amused to be offended. Like, is that the best you can do? The other caricature I didn't like, and the one that did really stick out to me, was the bully trope assigned to the dark-skinned, overweight character, loud, brazen, and devoid of nuance. She is clearly meant to amuse, and there were some parts where I did find her quite funny, but she is neither endearing nor given the depth to challenge her unflattering depiction. Then there was also Pepe Sanuga's Elaine White, the pastor's daughter turned moral scold, similarly reduced to a stereotype. A Bible-thumping caricature, Elaine becomes a foil to the other woman's liberation rather than being a fully fleshed out character. Satirizing her rigid religiosity for modern audiences obviously would land quite well, but in a historical context, I couldn't shake off how hollow it felt. Religious conviction, in the 1940s carried much more a serious weight, a guiding principle that would have evoked respect or at least deeper conflict, as opposed to the dismissiveness that it receives here in Tyler's film. Again, obviously these satirizations reflect modern sentiments, reflect modern detachments with certain religiosity, and the degree that I can relate is symptomatic of the degree to which the dynamic around this character, Pepe, isn't as genuine to the historical context as it could be. My other gripe, and again, a genuine, this is what I'm genuinely quite upset about, is that I knew nothing about Major Charity Adams, and she made the 688. Guys, the film was over 2 hours. There was more than enough time. She enters the story a quarter way through, already hardened and largely unlikable, although, I actually did like her going in. First introductions, I did like her, but I got the feeling that we were not supposed to like her. I mean, her life story, her evolution, her life struggles, her extraordinary accomplishments are effectively relegated to dialogue rather than ever shown throughout the film. And that upset me, especially given how well Kerry Washington, handled what she was given. Instead, most of the screen time is dedicated to romantic entanglements and superficial banter amongst the women, whilst, yes, many times actually quite entertaining, ultimately detracting from the profound history, Major Charity Adams, her life story, how she got to where we found her. I think that profound history deserved center stage, and it just didn't really get that. Like I said, I went into the film knowing next to nothing about her, and I came out of the film knowing next to nothing about her. I came out of the film knowing very little about her, and I found that a little bit unfortunate. And so I had to substitute a lot of my opinion of her with secondary research. Anyway, on to my final point. We're not in the 1940s, we are in 2024. And there are other conversations, other discussions that this film is inflaming. On the back of a much more galvanized and frustrated influence of third wave feminism, I have to appreciate that for as much as I did enjoy the film, the subject matter that this film does deal with has inflamed more recent conversations in 2024. Specifically, women at war. Not in non-combat roles as accurate to the 6888, but serving on the front lines in intimate combat against the men of your enemy forces. I think before entering this conversation, we need to appreciate that there are many roles and services that men and women contribute to the army. And when it comes to the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, which allowed women to serve in, quote, non-combat roles such as messengers, military postal employees, chauffeurs, and telephone and telegraph operators. Again, to emphasize, these are non-combat roles. And these are crucial roles to the operation and functionality of any army unit. But my interrogation is about combat roles and what are the implications of this specifically for young girls, for mothers, for women in general. The 6888 offers a sanitized depiction of war, except say for the first few minutes of the film. The violence this film portrays is for the large part interpersonal, focused on racism, discrimination, training obstacles, rather than the visceral life or death stakes of hand-to-hand combat. And I truly believe that this omission speaks to a larger societal detachment. The roles of men and women today, whether you like it or not, are becoming increasingly fluid. And yet, we absolutely cannot ignore the anatomical and the psychological distinctions that have historically shaped those roles. In theory, equality means offering every individual, man or woman, the liberty to choose their path, whether that be on the front lines, or pursuing a career in business or in government, or staying at home with your kids, whatever the case may be. But equality, again, my personal opinion, does not mean that we should ignore practicality, especially when it comes to the logistics of war, or dismiss the natural predispositions that have allowed our societies to thrive. The idea of women in combat naturally raises a lot of critical questions. Can they fight? Yes, of course. They have the autonomy to choose. Should they? Well, that is obviously a much more complex question. See, the thing is, war at its core is not a political game. It is not an ideological wrestling. It is a ruthless contest of physical strength and endurance. It is about survival, strategy, and efficiency. Nations send their most physically capable to the battlefield because they want to win. Not for ideological reasons, but for existential ones. Most women, not all women, I have to make that caveat very important, but most women, biologically speaking, are not optimized for this role on a mass scale, especially when it comes to the logistics of war, and especially when it comes to making sure as a country we win. Autonomy is undeniably essential in 2024, but so is acknowledging the limits imposed by nature and the dire cost of ignoring them. At the same time, this conversation isn't just about women in combat. It is about the very nature of war and the people that we are willing to sacrifice. I personally recoil at the idea of sending any loved one, a husband, a friend, a brother, to go out on the front lines and die for my government's selfish or misguided agenda. I'm sorry, but I don't want my men at war. It's not about whether or not, women should have the choice to serve in brutal combat, especially in Western societies. Most of us do have that choice, and we choose not to for very obvious reasons. But I also don't get the feeling that men in the emerging generation have the unique drive to fight for their families, for their wives, for their children at whatever cost necessary. And that's just because young men in the emerging generation increasingly don't have wives, children, and families. Vulnerable family units at this stage in life. 18, 19, early 20s. I don't know many men my age who have that stable family unit. And let's not forget that young women, 18, 19, into their early 20s, are simply not sat home with 2 children at the task of maintaining a society's economy as businesswomen, as legislators, as upholding the economy's functionality without men who are on the front lines, whilst at the same time nurturing, maturing, educating, and raising up a vulnerable generation. That, quite frankly, is just not our concern as a generalization. In fact, young women, by and large, I can definitely speak to the young women I know, we have an aversion to pregnancy this early in life, to the increasingly burdensome task of raising up a vulnerable generation and making sure they turn out right. There is undeniably much more of an emphasis on career focus, but at the same time, I'm not convinced that young men have that drive either. That is, making sure that the younger generation turns out right. We're just very good at complaining about how awful and insufferable they apparently are. How they can't read, how they are misbehaved, how they don't have any capacity to engage in delayed gratification. We are prioritized in getting to a place where we can be rich and ageless and economically secure. And progressive, of course, but at what cost? It is not an ideal state of empowerment on either end, honestly, that I appreciate. I think true liberty means every man, every woman has the choice to carve out whatever life it is that they want for themselves. Whether that be you stay at home or you climb the corporate ladder. But I do think that there is a severe absence of application to our biologically adapted and essential advantages as they pertain to refining a society and making sure we don't all go insane. And when I say refining a society, I quite literally mean creating one that is robust and that doesn't feel impossible to navigate within. Creating one where our children are not plagued by so many mental health issues. Creating a society where we're not all sick, where we're not all tired. We are much more prioritized in securing ourselves economically and complaining about the kids. and of course complaining about how crazy and tired we feel. These specialities, as they relate to the natural predispositions of men and women, are being applied less and less, and to a certain extent, in some extremities, they are becoming disordered and sometimes unfair. But what sickens me more in a more immediate sense is the current state of things. For a young person, specifically for a young man, there is no wife, there are no children, they might not even be a girlfriend. There is no vulnerable generation you see as invaluable to fight for, because today's anxiety is making life work, as we know it, in an increasingly eroding economy. The anxiety is, gosh, I need work experience. I need a degree. I need some validity to my name so that I can move out of my parents' house, start paying my own bills, make my own money, and do all of that without, losing my mind. Because navigating any real, authentic relationship experience, intimate relationship experience, is a headache that I cannot afford to have. And I mean that literally. Therapy is draining some of our bills and it's not even working the way it's supposed to. But yeah, career anxieties, crushing debt, and the rising costs of keeping ourselves sane are defining our priorities, not necessarily the preservation of the next generation. But again, we are excellent at catastrophizing and complaining about them without any genuine investment in them. Maybe, hey, honestly, and this is not necessarily comfortable for me to admit, but maybe it's because we still feel like kids ourselves. Maybe we need to grow up a little. And I think the urgency to become resilient, to mature, is what about this film, The 6888, stuck with me. This obviously isn't the story of The 6888, but it is a parallel conversation that, to me at least, feels urgent. One that we absolutely we cannot afford to neglect as we reflect on the sacrifices of our past generations for us and the choices that we make every day for the future, not just ourselves, not just our security in this world, because at the end of the day, we're not going to live forever. There are others coming up after us, and they are going to talk about us. They are going to look up to us. And I would see it as the greatest honor if I could be proud of the story that they tell about me. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sticking it till the end if that is what you decided to do. But I will see you very soon. I'm so grateful for your attention, but you take care and goodbye.